throughout the area, especially in the basin, including the fight for the Grand Coulee Dam, the Ephrata Army Airport, and historic ruins of Grant County. So when not researching history, Mick is the owner and operator of Qualls Agriculture Laboratory, a 300-acre field lab located near Ephrata, which has been in business for more than 27 years and centers around biotechnology, pesticide efficiency, and food residue testing. Prior to that, Mick spent 6 years with the WSU Cooperative Extension Service as an extension agent, including here in Ellensburg in the 1970s. Then 11 years as a field research representative with Stauffer Chemical Company. He holds an associate's degree in engineering from Stockton City College, a Bachelor of Science degree in crop science from California Polytechnic College, and a Master of Science degree in agronomy from Montana State University. Please join me in welcoming Mick.
Is my speaker on? Is it okay? Okay, you guys. Okay, Sharon. This is my wife, Sharon. We're both kind of entertaining you guys. Sharon, can you turn this thing up a little bit? You're not checking us.
Sadie's doing it at the finish.
She's doing it at the. You should be there.
Okay, try now.
Turn it that way.
Okay, testing. How we doing there, you guys? Okay, we're getting it clear in the back here. You guys, we're going to take you down two roads. We're going to really show you who Ben Snipes was, but then we're going to take you over to the McCarty Gang, who's going to end up robbing his bank in Roslyn, and we're going to show you those characters too that just ended up in Ephrata. And anyway, Sharon, do you want to say anything at this point?
Well, Mick's emphasis is really on Ephrata and Grant County, and so he always likes to tie his history talks to something that happened in Grant County. And so we had notorious outlaws who lived in Grant County, who were responsible for the bank robberies in both Ellensburg and Roslyn, and they contributed heavily to the fact that Ben Snipes ended up a poor man. So that's the reason we're weaving this tale in the way that we will.
Okay, you guys, if you were just going down Interstate 90, right down near Ephrata, well, on I-90, just 3 miles, that's my research farm I was telling you about. Then we have a tree fruit station, but we do all kinds of studies for all the major chemical companies and seed companies. And we've been there for, like I say, 27 years and having lots of fun. But you guys recognize any of those kids? I was a county agent here in the 4-H program. And I took these kids to Pullman several times, and also we went back and forth to Olympia several times. This is 1970, 71, 72. And there's a bunch of them too. Habermans, just all the cattle people too. But we had a lot of fun here. Even, I don't know, how many of you guys have been to Camp Illahee? I took this whole bunch to Camp Illahee. Anyway, we had a lot of fun. But the Columbia Basin was just getting started in 1972. I mean, they were putting up center pivots. That's why I had to get over there. Big time agriculture. But I always say this, you guys, there's something in the water in central Washington. There's no state in the Union that can touch us for this history, the Indians, Indian graves. Then here's all the gold miners, and that's what we're going to talk about now. Ben Snipes and all that bunch. And then here's all the railroads, geez, Milwaukee, and then the Great Northern. You can just talk all day about that, and it wasn't that long ago. And then, of course, the Wild Horse Roundup. We had thousands of horses running all over this area. They were wild. Then here comes these outlaws, the McCartys, Matt Warner, bank robbers, and then their hideout in Ephrata. And then, of course, here comes Billy Clapp, O'Sullivan, Nat Washington, Frank Bell. And I'm just saying they ended up in Ephrata. And the influence on the whole world at that time, World War II, Hanford. But then here's Nat Washington Sr., and now Washington Jr. They're direct relatives of George Washington. They lived in Ephrata, and nobody knew it. And but even Nat Washington Jr., he was an attorney at the Nuremberg trials. An amazing history. But then here's the Grand Coulee Dam, Priest Rapids, Wanapum Dam. There's 11 dams on the Columbia River, but we got all that electricity. 5 American presidents. I've got in Ephrata, Roosevelt 4 times, Hoover 3 times, even Harry Truman 3 times. Get off the train, walk around town, but you can't find a high school kid in Ephrata that can name 1 American president, and I don't know why. They just don't teach that stuff. And of course, here's the Ephrata Army Base. In 3 years, we trained over 7,000 pilots, and then put them back on the train and shipped them either to the Pacific or to Europe. And of course, and even right here, you guys, Ellensburg had a big military base here too for training pilots. Of course, then here's the Columbia Basin Irrigation Project, and right now we're opening up new land, more land. We've got the cheapest electricity in the United States, and we've got water galore. So we are bringing in and opening up new land right now. And then here's the Strategic Air Command, biggest airport in the United States during the Cold War. It's still there, you guys. And we're famous for our saloons. You know, if you've ever been up to B Street on Grand Coulee, that was the biggest party in the United States. It went on for 6 years, day and night. And that's another whole talk I give is on that. But that's where I met Sadie. There was Sadie. See you, Sadie? She was collecting donations for the Kittitas County. Where is Sadie? Sadie, where? Anyway, but no, you're famous for a lot of things, you guys. But what we're going to talk about today is Ben Snipes and that sort of thing. But really, the biggest cattleman in the United States. You got to go to the Oklahoma City Cowboy Hall of Fame. And you'll see a lot more about Ben Snipes. But here's my question to you is, why did your relatives even come west? You're sitting here today for a lot of reasons. And people, we live so fast. And we just don't realize that, of course, the Great Dust Bowl, your family came west to get jobs. And then, of course, during the Depression, that caused a lot of people to come west. But the big one was the gold rush. Man, you could turn over a rock and you're a rich person. And so that's what brought a lot of your relatives out. But I always like to ask people, where's the driest place in the whole United States? You're going to say, oh, it's Arizona. No, they get 15 inches of rain. The driest is Ephrata. They get like 5 to 6 inches up here. And why would anybody go to Ephrata? But we're going to talk about that. That's why the outlaws came to Ephrata. It was isolation. So, but the ironic thing is just over that hill is the wettest area in the United States. That's Seattle and that sort of thing. But that kind of sets the stage for what we're going to talk to you guys about. So Sharon, do you have anything to offer to this great story here yet?
No, I think you're doing an excellent job.
Okay. Now, here's, you guys, it's called gold fever. I don't think any of you have ever experienced gold fever, but if you can go up and get in a creek and find a bunch of this stuff, and then you go back to your hometown and you're a hero. You went from the lowest rung on the social ladder to the highest. And man, that drove people to do crazy things. But it was called gold fever. And boy, thousands and thousands of people came to California, Arizona, Montana, but that's gold fever. I'm going to take you up with Ben Snipes up into Canada. And I hope you can see this because this is really an important map. When President Garfield in 1881, now see in 81, the Cariboo Gold Rush was over. But he told Lieutenant Simmons to get out there and draw me a map of central Washington, and they're going to bring railroads across there. So this is the map he drew, but he noticed a freeway going through the sagebrush. I mean, look at this. There's Moses Lake. And it branched, and there's Ephrata, but enough sagebrush flats. But the question to you is, why did it branch? why, and it's, like I say, he drew it. There was no concrete or asphalt. This was just thousands of people that went through here. And that's not how Ben Snipes got up to Canada. He would cross at White Bluffs down here, and then he would stay on this side of the Columbia River, and then go up Moses Coulee, and then on up to Omak. So those trails are not due to Ben Snipes and cattle. That was just wagons and wagons and wagons. But that's my test question, is why did they do that? Why, Coulee City is still the oldest town in Grant County, but why did they do that? Why would they branch? Well, there's why, to get whiskey, you guys. These are your relatives. And, this is just an artist's view of it. But anyway, that's Coulee City. And thousands of people. It had 3 different names, but at the time of the gold rush, it was called 17th Crossing, or McEntee, and it was just a route. But you notice these cattle, they've got long horns. Of course, here, back to the White Bluffs, this ferry was not there. When you had, let's say, 500 head of cattle, and you're going to cross at White Bluffs, you needed help. And what you had were Indians that would help you. Sharon, do you have anything to offer there?
Well, there are no photographs of Ben Snipes' trip crossing White Bluffs there. So we're showing you the ferry just as a placeholder. When Ben Snipes crossed at White Bluffs, he was very dependent on his Indian friends, and they took him to this place, which was different than where the military was crossing the Columbia River. And the cool part of the story, when he crossed the river the first time, his Indian friends went and got their relatives, and they formed a corridor of canoes, one on one side, one on the other side, and the cattle went between the 2 rows of canoes. And so they only lost one head of cattle on this part of the journey. And so Ben was just remarkable. He must have been an unbelievably gregarious and great guy, because he was well thought of by all of the tribes, and they helped him considerably during his career here with the cattle.
Okay, I want to back up, though, to this map. I'd like to ask you guys test questions. Why did everybody cross at White Bluffs? What was so great about that? And even, the Indians crossed there a lot. And then here's Fort Walla Walla, way over here. They actually, when they were taking troops up to Camp Chelan, they would come around and cross at White Bluffs and come right up through Ephrata. But does anybody know it's a wide spot in the river, and today that's where Priest Rapids Dam is. It's not because the water was shallow. Cattle had to swim across it. But to this day, you can't go to White Bluffs. You can't go to that because it's on Hanford, and they won't let you even in there to see it. But anyway, be thinking about all that, because Ben Snipes is going to get mixed up with all this in just a minute. Okay, there's that and there's that. Now, here's your relatives, you guys. They don't like you to see this picture. I was telling you that gold fever. Look at this. They don't even know where they're going. About food, housing. This is the Cariboo Trail. This went on for 5 years. And look at this. They always had to stop and load up on liquor because they didn't have internet. They didn't know what was waiting for them up at the top. But that's a good picture of your relatives, you guys, with gold fever. And that would do it. Now, we're going to tell you about Ben Snipes. He's going to be born in North Carolina, right there. And then his family's going to haul him to Iowa. And then he alone is going to get on the Oregon Trail and come out. He's heard about these gold rushes. But Sharon, do you have anything to offer there?
He got gold fever in Iowa. His family didn't want him to leave, but he got on a wagon train on the Oregon Trail and went out toward Oregon, and then eventually made his way down to California to Sutter's Mill. But unfortunately, by the time he got there, the gold was played out. So this is interesting. It's how life works sometimes. He apprenticed with a butcher in California. So that's kind of what started him on the path that we know about here in Central Washington.
To follow my arrows here, it's hard to see that, but he did go down into California to Sutter's Mill on a horse and saw the gold rush there. And then he actually rode clear up to Fraser River because he had heard about the Fraser River. Now this isn't way up. This is just across the border into Fraser, and he saw the demand for beef, and that was more than gold could offer you. What did I do? Let me hit my picture again. There it is. There's another one. The first thing he did is he had a friend who had a cattle down here in Yakima, and he talked him into letting him have 102 head, and he didn't buy them. He just said, I'm going to take them up there and sell them, and then I'll bring the money back and pay you. And it turned out that he sold them for $125 a head, and of course, there's the first time you're going to see Barkerville. But I'd like to see how many of you people here have been to Barkerville. Because I've been there. Man, that's a neat place still. And I'll show you lots of pictures of it. These are your relatives, you guys. And, okay, there's that. Now, here's Ben Snipes. Ben did not carry a gun. Everybody else did. And he didn't drink whiskey. And he was just a little guy, 5 feet 8 inches tall. And this is the first picture. But like I say, you got to go to the Cowboy Hall of Fame in Oklahoma City, and you'll learn all about Ben Snipes. But in this state, we're not making any big deal about him. And I don't know why. He was really big time.
And that's his brand on that the Shadow S was the Ben Snipes brand.
Yeah. Okay, there's the first picture. You know, that's an artist's view. But look at those cattle. I mean, that's what they had. Now, these cows didn't come from Washington State or even Oregon. Now, over in Texas and Oklahoma, they had these longhorn cows, and they brought some up to Oregon, and that's when Ben started even breeding cows and getting them ready to go up to the Cariboo. But now, I'm going to jump over to the Chisholm Trail. This is what most people in this country hear about, is the Chisholm Trail, taking beef cattle up to Kansas, where the railroad came in, and then they took those cattle clear back to the east. But like I was saying, some of these cattle made its way over to Oregon, and that's what Ben Snipes was taking up to the Cariboo.
The interesting thing about those longhorn cattle was after the Civil War, Texas was in big trouble. And one of the things that they had an abundance of was those longhorn cattle running free. And so some enterprising Texans decided that they would be able to sell the beef east to the big populations east. And the way that the longhorn cattle got up to Washington is the military also took the cattle for beef. And so that's how Ben Snipes' herd got to the seed herd that he had got to Washington.
All of my parents and relatives were in Duncan, Oklahoma, right on the Chisholm Trail. We even had a big feedlot there. And but that just, then during the Great Dust Bowl, that's when my parents went out to Bakersfield, and I was born in Bakersfield. So I've spent a lot of time in Oklahoma. And that part of the history is cattle going east. But we're talking today about cattle going north. And Ben's going to even come in this little town. Here's the question I've got for you guys. If let's say you and me, we're going to take 1,000 head of cattle, what time of year would we do it? We gotta wait till the snow is melted, and Ben knew this. You wait till March. The snow's melted, and the bunch grass is starting to grow. Here's another test question: can cattle eat sagebrush? Can you eat sagebrush? No, you cannot. If the Walmart stores go empty, you cannot eat sagebrush. It's the most resistant plant in the world. It's winter hardy. It's drought hardy. There's not one insect will eat it, not one disease. And with genetic engineering, we can pull genes out of that sagebrush and give drought resistance to corn and cotton and stuff like that. But the point is that if you're going to take 1,000 head, you're going to do it when there's water. And he learned this the hard way. And sometimes he would take off, like taking cattle over to Montana, and end up, with no water but lots of feed. And next thing you know, I'll show you that. But bunch grass, that's the big rich. It's really a rich feed for cattle. So that's what we're going to do, you guys. Okay. he learned how to work with the Indians. A lot of Indians didn't like gold miners because they just abused them and took their land. But one thing about Ben Snipes is he would give them a couple of cows if they would help him cross rivers. And boy, they were waiting for him, and they would really help him do that. And even down, at White Bluffs. But Sharon, do you have anything to offer on that?
Well, this turned out to be a really great stroke of luck that Ben was such a great guy and fostered such great relationships with the native peoples, because this was right when the Indian Wars happened in the state of Washington, in the Washington Territory. And so that he had great relationships with the tribes and with people who could function as intermediaries meant that he didn't get attacked. His cattle didn't get stolen regularly. Some cattle did get stolen. And there were no deaths of the people that were taking his cattle north. So it turned out to be a really good thing, and I think it wasn't anything planned. I think he was just a nice guy.
This is an artist's view of Moses Cooley. Don Nutt of Cooley City has a big art saloon up there, and he really did a good job on this painting. But it shows Moses Cooley and shows Ben Snipes bringing cattle. And of course, these Indians didn't know where he was going with them. He was going up to Canada, but over and over and over again. That's one of the things we've studied and studied, trying to figure out how many times in 5 years did Ben Snipes take cattle up to the Cariboo. I mean, clear up to Barkerville. And we'll talk about that more, but that's just an artist's view of it. These signs are all over the place, you guys. This is one in Okanogan County. People nowadays just aren't interested in this subject, but it talks about all the thousands of head of cattle and going up to Barkerville and so on. But even in Grant County, but Ben Snipes did not go through Grant County. A lot of people think he went through Ephrata. A lot of the gold miners did, but not Ben Snipes. And we'll talk more about his route. There's a picture of the route, and I'm glad some of you guys in here have been up there. But it's a long trail, and the Canadians have rebuilt that whole highway now, and it's just really neat. They've got these signs all the way, and it talks about the 1860s, the Cariboo gold fields, miners, traders, adventurers, many afoot. But one thing interesting about it, even back in 1860, they had these roadhouses, like every 12 to 15 miles. They had roadhouses, and even today they've rebuilt a lot of those roadhouses, so it's a place to stay and eat. But it was a big deal for like 5 years.
Of course, when Ben was going, there were no roadhouses. He was sleeping on the ground with his Indian pals, and it wasn't a very comfortable trip. And when you saw the map of the 800-mile Cariboo Trail, you have to realize that Ben tacked on another 400 miles because he would go back from the Cariboo without a gun, loaded up with gold, to the bank, the nearest bank, which was Portland. So we're starting to see about why he had an interest in banks.
If you drive all the way up there, this is what it looks like today. This is the Fraser River right here. This is where you would take your pan for gold, turn over a rock, and you're a rich person. And that's Barkerville right now. With Google Earth, you can come down on it too. But the Canadians have spent a lot of money rebuilding this town. And it's a tourist town. But now, back in these days, there were gold rushes, you guys, all the way from Arizona, all through California, and even in this state. We had gold rushes here, and then, but this one was the biggest of them all, and they had more success bringing gold out and then going home with it, and then more people come. But there's one thing about all these gold rushes I'd like to show you. Someone finds the gold and then goes home and says, there's gold up there, and then here comes the miners just risking their life, not even knowing what's up there, and then here comes all the cattle, and these cattlemen that are getting rich, and then here comes all the whiskey, and then here comes all the women that just fall out of the sky, and then they have a big party and just burn the town down. Well, that's right. These are your relatives. I keep telling you this. And then they build it back. They burned Barkerville down 3 times. They did. These people love to have parties, and these are your relatives. But then here they are building it back, and now you can see how you can see all the fire and everything, but that's Barkerville back in those days. But we're telling you about Ben Snipes. We're going to jump over to Outlaws here in a minute, but okay, Barkerville today. That's what it looks like if you drove up there. And now this map's hard to read, but it starts off with the White Bluffs. There's where he crossed the river. Then he stayed along the river. He didn't go out through the center of Washington. He stayed along the river. One is the elevation. A river just drops about 1 foot in 100, so you don't want your cows climbing over mountains, and he would stay on the side of the river and go all the way up to Barkerville. But if you go to Montana, especially over here, Deer Lodge, or even Bozeman or Butte, talk to them, they'll say, oh yeah, we brought cattle up here from Texas. No, Ben Snipes took the very first cattle over to Texas. He took about 800 head, but he lost 200 of them out here near Sprague Lake, and all the books tell about it. He just didn't have the water, and these cows just died of lack of water. But so if the test question is, where's the first cattle that got to Montana? It came from Washington State, and he took a lot of cattle around. So.
He was an enterprising businessman. As the gold played out in Canada, he was always looking for opportunities, and this idea to go to Montana was a solid one, only the route was not good, and he never went back to Montana. He cut his losses and he didn't go back to Montana, but he was always looking for opportunity.
Well, what it shows here is Moses Cooley, too. He crossed, and then he went up. Then he had to cross the river again. He had to cross the Columbia River twice up near Omac. Now, Sharon, tell him about his wife.
This is kind of a cool story. Mary Perot was 16 years old. Ben Snipes was 29 years old. Mary Perot was in the Willamette Valley in Oregon, and she was kind of a premier family. She came from a premier family. Her family had come across about 10 years earlier on the Oregon Trail, and the two met and fell in love. And her parents weren't adverse to the romance, but they were, and this is the cool part, she's 16 years old, and they are adamant that she finish her university at Willamette University. Well, Ben was having none of that, so the two got married before she finished, but she did finish her degree at Willamette as Mrs. Ben Snipes.
In 1864, there couldn't have been too much of a university there at that time, but anyway, so he did get married. That's the main thing we're telling you. And they did have children. How many children?
Just one.
Okay.
And that doesn't end well.
Okay. Now, we're going to jump over to Outlaws, but we're taking down two roads. You guys are famous here for a lot of reasons. But if you want to read anything about all the Outlaws, all of these books, even the Harry Tracy book and the Matt Warner and all these books, and if you only read one book, it would be this one, In Pursuit of the McCartys. And it tells about the robbing of the Roslyn Bank and Ben Snipes, and then, of course, here's the Wild Horse Roundup, and there's Butch Cassidy. And yes, these guys taught Butch Cassidy how to rob banks. Butch ran with them. It wasn't the other way around. And did he ever come to this area? We're pretty darn close to proving he did. But here's Hank Vaughn, one of the biggest horse thieves in the United States. And I'll tell you a bit more about him. Because as soon as they robbed the Roslyn Bank, they arrested Hank because they had his horses. I mean, they had his brand on them. But Hank wasn't there when they robbed the Roslyn Bank. But anyway, that's what we're going to divert to now, is these outlaws that just happened to be in Ephrata at that time. And, of course, the wild horses, can you believe that's over by Moses Lake? This is Crab Creek. Thousands of horses. There were no predators here. Lots of water, lots of bunch grass. And the horses loved it. And they'd round them up, put them on trains. There's the Ephrata in the background. They did this about 6 times. And they rounded up all these horses and put them on the trains because the market was way back. This is hard to see, but the market, look at, there was a town about every 40 miles on those railroads. And man, they all wanted horses. There were no John Deere tractors then, and so it was a hot market. So, and the sheep market now too, lots of feed. See, I was telling you, sheep will not eat sagebrush either, but they'll eat that bunch grass. And man, here comes about 5 big sheep operations right into central Washington and even here in Ellensburg. Now, here's the story you'll hear every time. Even though we had a lot of cattle and a lot of these gold fields played out. So a lot of these guys that were miners, they didn't want to go home and broke. So they went to work on cattle ranches, even right here in Ellensburg and in Montana and around. And then what happened, the winter of 86, 87 killed the cattle. Every cow operation today, the old timers, everybody knows about this winter, 86, 87. So now what are you going to do? You're working on a cattle ranch. The boss is going to tell you, I don't have any cattle, goodbye, good luck. And so that's what happened. That's going to lead to the outlaws and then Charlie Russell is going to draw this picture. It's called Paying the Piper. It's all about a man here. See, in those days, you could kill anybody who was trying to mess with your brand. And who knows what you guys call the little iron? It's about a foot long. It's called a running iron. Yeah, it means you could just, a little iron. You just take it, heat it up, and you can change a brand. Doesn't mean you're going to brand the cow. You're going to change the brand from him over to you. And, oh, yeah, this is Montana, Washington. You could kill anybody. They go tell the sheriff, I killed a man out there, and he'd say, okay, that's okay. Yeah, so you didn't want to do that. So let's say that all of us now are gold miners that realize we can't do that. So what are we going to do? We can't go home. We don't have any money. So we're going to go to the saloon. This is the Coulee City Saloon. There's a big meeting going on here. So what are they talking about? Well, they're talking about how they're going to make money, and then they realize, well, it's easier just to rob banks than it is to, all you got to do is walk into a bank, lay your gun down, and they hand you all the money. Well, that sure beats getting shot out in the woods.
And just for context here, by the mid-1800s, Ben Snipes, even just prior to the Great Freeze in 1886, 87, he had 125,000 cattle. He was a millionaire at that time. So we got all of these outlaws who are looking for a target, and we've got one of the richest men in the United States with cattle. That's why this story kind of weaves together in the way that it does.
Okay, so now, how do you rob? Do you have to go to college to learn how to be a bank robber? No, you have to know how to use relay horses. That means you get your wife or your girlfriends 5 miles out of town to hold the fresh horses. And you ride these out, change horses, and you're home free. I mean, these guys robbed banks all the way. They robbed the Wenatchee Bank, Butte, Montana, even Walla Walla. But it really worked for them, relay horses. And that's how they're going to rob the Roslyn Bank, by getting their wives to hold horses up in the mountains. So, okay, let me keep going. Now, there's Nellie. She was famous for holding the relay horses.
She was kind of the queen of the outlaw wives. She really bought into the whole thing, loved the romance of it. She was married to George McCarty. You're going to meet some of the other women who were married to the McCartys and involved with the outlaws, and they weren't quite as enthusiastic as Nellie.
Okay, now here's the question. Why did these outlaws go to different hideouts? Well, it's because they had a family. They had family there, relatives. And look at these. All these towns, this was kind of a circle of how the outlaws would go from one town to the next. And here's Ephrata and Coulee City. And did they have outlaws there? Yeah. I mean, did they have family? Yes, they did. And this is Matt. These guys changed their names a lot. Look, any book you read, you're going to see this fellow, Matt Warner, Raz Lewis, Diamond Dick. He's going to help rob the Roslyn Bank too, and come right through here. But okay, there's Tom McCarty. Tom was the oldest McCarty son, and this is where we talk about Butch Cassidy. Everybody thinks that he taught the McCartys. No, Matt Warner. I mean, these guys taught Butch how to rob banks, and they robbed the Telluride Bank. But now this is still in Telluride, Colorado. That's the bank right there. But the point I'm making is that now you've robbed a bank. Where are you going to go? Well, you got to go to your relatives or to an isolated place where we can be taken care of, our horses, we get food. That's your family. So where is the place that they're going to go? Well, they're going to go to Coulee City because if you go to the Coulee City graveyards, you'll see McCarty. Now, I got to say this, that McCarty is a real common Irish name. Do we have any McCartys in the room here today? So usually I get a few hands that go up. But in Ephrata, there's probably 8 families of McCartys. So it's a very common name. But if you look, now Sharon and I went up to the Coulee City graveyard, Coulee City, and Coulee City was isolated, had everything, even had saloons. But so there we are. They went to Coulee City, and then from there they learned about this place called Ephrata that had a ranch for sale. And these guys have got money galore. So now they're going to come down to Ephrata and they're going to buy the ranch, the 7U ranch, from Frank Beasley. And look at that. See that? That's the old wagon road up to Camp Chelan. But you can see trees, a barn, and that beautiful house back there. And they had the railroad. What else could you ask for? But they had isolation. And here, now this is Frank Beasley's house, and this is on the 7U ranch, which is just a little bit behind where the courthouse is today, you guys, if you hold that picture up and look at. Okay, now here comes the McCarty sisters. Sharon, do you know anything about those 3 ladies?
Well, as I told you earlier, there was very
I'm going to build the biggest bank in the state. I'm going to build it in Ellensburg. So, Sharon, do you have anything to offer?
Well, the other thing that was going on, not only was he interested in banking, but he had to diversify because in the days of the cattle rides and the taking the cattle up over the range to destinations was over with. There were cattle boats on the Columbia River, the railroads had arrived, so his little niche was gone, and so he needed to diversify. So he built this bank in Ellensburg. He bought huge parcels of property in Seattle. He had a flour mill in the Dalles. Ben was moving away from cattle, and the writing was on the wall because irrigation was coming to the Yakima Valley and the settlers were arriving like crazy. So his true trade was getting to be compromised, so he was trying to remain a rich man by diversifying.
Okay, that's on the corner of 4th and Pearl. Now, guess what? Does the wind ever blow in Ellensburg? Look at that. Burned the whole town down. It's flat. And there's the Ben Snipes Bank after the fire. Ben Snipes. And did he quit and go someplace else? No, he built it back. But there's just another picture from another angle. Look at the town of Ellensburg.
Well, you got to understand that bank was only up, the bank that he built, the first one that you saw, for 6 months, and then the fire took it down. So we've got a man here who's starting to have financial problems because he has to rebuild this bank, which he does in 1 year's time. And as you'll see, he's also going to get into a bank in Roslyn.
Okay, there's the one he rebuilt now. So he rebuilds it in 1890, and then he heads up to Roslyn and builds a bank up there too. But it wasn't nearly as fancy as this one, but how can you imagine how much money that cost to do that? So anyway, but he also, if you can read that sign, it talks about real estate loans. I mean, he was into everything, and he was just a little skinny cowboy, but anyway, he was rich. And so then here's another couple books that talk all about, this one on the left talks about the Ben Snipes Bank in Roslyn and the robbery up there. So, okay, there's about the only picture you're ever going to probably find of Roslyn in its heyday was this picture right here, 1892, and there it shows. Oh, and there's a lot of stories there. This place had more like 20 saloons, but this I put 12 on there. you can read about it, but this was made of all these ethnic groups, and they didn't want to socialize. They worked in the mines together, but even English and Irish and Scottish, but they have all these saloons, and if you can read them, the Palace, and then there's the Silver Saloon. Most of those are saloons, you guys. But then here are the banks of the bank, and even on this day, the Brick Tavern was there. And we're still trying to find out exactly where the Ben Snipes Bank was. There's no building that I can find that says bank, but that gives you a picture. And what's going on here in this picture is they're having a funeral, and it's a pretty formal day.
The people at the Roslyn Museum said this was quite a coup for Ben Snipes, who had a bank in Ellensburg, which was kind of the big, robust, wonderful city, urban environment in central Washington, to go to Roslyn and be accepted there, because that was a ragtag, really hard coal mining town, 26 different ethnic people ethnic groups who were fighting with each other constantly. So again, speaks to the gregariousness and the likability of Ben Snipes that he could pull this off.
How many of you guys have been in the Roslyn Cemetery? See, yeah, I spent quite a bit of time there. I was a county agent, and I even started 4-H clubs up there. But the point is the ethnic groups would not bury each other in different, they had to have their own cemetery, and they're still up there, you guys. So it's a great place with great history. Okay, there's just another picture. Now that's it's just off the internet, but you can see what I'm showing you is this valley back here. And I do believe that's north, and that's where the McCartys are going to spend the night. And they're going to, well, let me back up to this one. This is where the books tell about them spending the night in the mountains, and Nellie holding the horses, and then coming into town, robbing the bank, and they did shoot a fellow. In fact, Sharon, who got shot that day?
Well, the McCartys were supposed to be fairly peaceful when they robbed banks. They didn't use violence that much. But on this day, Abernathy was the manager of the bank, and they conked him out pretty good with his head. And then they had people that were guarding outside of the bank, and it went wrong, and so they shot a couple people. But the McCartys were able to make a clean getaway.
Anyway, that's about the story and where we're going now. One of the artists of that book, called In Search of the McCartys, he drew this map. It shows that Nellie held the horses, and then once they robbed the bank, they went up, they got all mixed up in the mountains, and the posse was chasing them. Then the posse gave up, and they came all the way down, and there's Wenatchee. But you can see, that's about where the Rock Island Dam is. And then they split up. And George and Nellie, they headed north. They split the money. And then Tom and Bill went this way, and then Matt, which is Diamond Dick, he went over to Ephrata. And that's where they're going to come and arrest him.
The irony of this robbery is they kind of got it wrong, because they thought the money, the payroll, was going to come to the bank, but it actually went to the coal company. So they didn't get nearly as much of a payday out of this robbery as they thought, which is kind of sad, because they had some trouble because of this robbery.
Okay, now there's what they look like. That's Diamond Dick in the middle. That's Matt. They went to Ephrata and arrested him. These guys took off they also arrested George, but then Tom and Bill, they went to Delta, Colorado to rob another bank. Can you believe that? But now there's the courthouse in Ellensburg, and you can see this is how it got wild. I mean, and Sharon, you're going to have to tell a little bit about it, but it's amazing what took place here. Okay, they arrested the wrong men first. They actually arrested Cal, Tom, and George, and then they had to, that's when their girlfriend spoke up and said, "You got the wrong guys."
Well, so Ben was just irate about this robbery of the Roslyn Bank, and he started pouring money into capturing the people indeed. And so first they found these 3 guys down in Oregon. They actually brought them back, started the trial, and actually convicted this Cal Hale when remember the girls in Salt Lake City? Ben had a $2,500 reward out, and these girls were not doing well financially, and they decided it was time to cash in on their relationship with the McCartys, and they called, I'm sure they wrote a letter. There were no cell phones in those days. They wrote a letter to the people in Ellensburg. It was quite an eloquent and accusatory letter, saying that it was the McCartys who had robbed the bank, and so these men were let go, and the McCartys were brought to trial.
Yes, and that's what's crazy about it, because Sarah she got paid $2,500 to squeal on her brothers and her husband, and she did, and that's what turned the trial around.
But this story is just so unbelievable. I can't believe that they haven't made this into a television movie, because the complications are just unbelievable. So Matt Warner and George McCarty are in jail, and they know that they're caught. And this slick-talking attorney comes, they kind of imply he came from Seattle, and he said that I can get you off for $8,000. Well, they got no money in jail. So the attorney talks them into telling them where they've stashed all of the money that they've accumulated over like 10 years. Well, it's a 7U ranch in Ephrata.
Yeah, they've got it hidden there in a can at 7U ranch. When he goes there and gets it.
So the attorney goes to the 7U ranch. He takes all the money. He says, I'll take all of the money. It will cost you $8,000 and expenses, and I promise I'll get you off. Well, part of the money that he used was he went and found Sarah Jane and determined that once they'd written the letter and the prosecutor had her and they had the McCartys dead to rights and were going to convict them, well, Sarah Jane shacked up with the prosecuting attorney. So all of a sudden, the defense attorney's got blackmail on his mind. So the trial, they compromised Sarah Jane and Rosa, and so he got the Matt Warner and George McCarty off. Well, the bad thing about George and Matt is they escaped from jail during the time that they were being held. So they walk out of the jail, free men, because they've been gotten off, and they get arrested for jail escape. So back in jail again. So this attorney works his magic a second time, and they get out. So he has fulfilled his promise. He's gotten them off. And so Matt says, okay, I want my money back. And the attorney gives him $500. And there had been tens of thousands of dollars buried at the 7U ranch. And Matt said, you said it would cost $8,000. And the attorney said, I told you there would be expenses. So the kicker on this is that Matt and the gang had been rich, now they're poor, and guess what Matt ends up being at the end of his career? A lawman.
He ends up being a sheriff. Yeah, there's a whole book on him becoming a lawman. Anyway, this is a wild and crazy time in your little town here. But what's going to happen is, now here's the girls that turned them in, and then I told you those other guys, they went to Delta, Colorado and robbed another bank. And then these two guys are dead. This is Bill and Fred. They got shot riding away on a horse. And Tom McCarty got away. So even though three of them went to rob the bank, these are the same three guys that were at Roslyn. But then they came and they got killed.
See, Fred was second generation. The McCartys were not violent in their robberies, but Fred went and shot somebody at this bank. And then his dad, who was Bill, went back to help. And so Bill and Fred were killed, and Tom got away.
Okay, so you guys are really famous. If you really get into this, there's one of the Ben Snipes cabins, and of course it's in Sunnyside at the museum there. He lived in a lot of these beautiful houses, but anyway. So in summary, you guys, Ben takes thousands of head of cattle up to the Cariboo, and then becomes a very rich man. And then Ben goes to Oregon, Washington, California. I mean, this guy was mobile. He really got around, but he was taking beef cattle up to the hungry miners. And then Ben will buy big parcels of land. We didn't even talk about this part of it. He went to Seattle, and even Goldendale. He bought lots of land and different businesses.
There was another thing that was going on at this time. The McCarty Gang robbed his bank, but another really tragic thing had affected his family at this time. When his family got in trouble financially, his son was now of age, and he decided he would emulate his dad and go dig some gold. And there was a new gold rush in Alaska. So his son went to Seattle and got on a boat called the Lady Jane Grey, and the boat foundered and all were lost. But Mary and Ben did not believe that their son had died. So Ben spent thousands of dollars following every lead to surface him. And the really sad story kind of breaks your heart. Mary lived on past Ben to 1920, and what the books say is that she kept a candle in her window every night until the day she died, waiting for her son to come home.
Anyway, Ben spends a fortune trying to, capturing the outlaws, and then, of course, the bank panic of 1893. He still had money in banks, but he lost it there too. So for a guy that had nothing, he ends up with nothing. And but he dies a poor man in Goldendale, Washington, in 1906. And if you want to go to the Oklahoma City Hall of Fame, there he is. But then, if you want to visit his grave, there it is in Goldendale. So he lived, what I see is 71 years. Just doing the math. And so that's how long he lived. He went all over this country, and man, he did a lot. So
the great story, so that we don't end on a downer here, he was 71 years old. He had a massive heart attack, and so he died. But what the books say is that when he was back in Goldendale, he put together a herd of 200, and he was on his way back.
Okay, I've always got test questions for you guys. You're doing pretty good. So who are these three guys? Who are you? Who's the guy on the left? Who's the guy in the middle? Well, okay, but who's this?
It's Curly.
That's Curly. What's that? That's Mo, and what's his name? Larry. Does everybody agree on that? Okay. Anyway, that's our last picture. Thanks for listening, you guys. That was I'd like to ask, does anybody have anything to offer? You guys are all historians too, but Sharon and I just got hooked on these stories, and especially coming from Ephrata. They had the worst outlaws in the United States there.
Yeah, who knew?
Okay, here.
I read in the book.
What's that?
I thought I read in the book.
He thought he read in the book.
Can I hold it?
Yeah, we can hear you.
He was up somewhere in Cariboo and got $40,000 worth of gold.
It's my favorite book.
He had to head back. He wrote for 38 to 47 hours straight. No fires, nothing allowed, because somebody knew he had the gold. And he finally did some Indian trick and went up into the Zoomies and watched them pass him by a day and a half later. That's
How
all
did he
right.
keep from freezing to death? That's what I want to know. Oh, that's winter country up there.
I don't know.
All I know is when I went to Barkerville, I found the graveyard up on the hill. There's a lot of graves up there. A lot of guys didn't know how cold it was going to be. Uh-oh, somebody told a lie. Okay, go ahead.
So did you tell us why he crossed the river in that certain spot?
Oh, you mean at White Bluffs?
Yeah.
No, I cannot find it out. Even the military crossed there. The Indians crossed there. And I have friends who wanted to go there to White Bluffs today.
There was some indication that the military was crossing nearer the Snake River, and it was a very, very, very choppy crossing, and they lost a lot of cattle, and it was just an inappropriate place to cross the river. And so I think it was Ben Snipes in crossing in 1858 with the first cattle that he took up, which drew the military to White Bluffs, and that's why it became a place to cross. The Indians had crossed there for years.
You'd think if it was just a foot deep, that's where you'd run your cattle. But no, it's deep there. And then the ferry showed that you had to have deep water for ferries. But you can't get there. I've had several friends try to drive the dirt roads down to White Bluffs, and they got fences across and gates. Okay, any other questions, you guys? We got a wealth of information in this room.
Didn't one time they crossed the river up there and they got a bunch of renegade Indians and they got the cattle swimming in a circle out there and they had to get them back on, they lost a day or two.
Yes, he said didn't sometimes when they were crossing the river, the cattle would get to swimming in a circle, and of course the Indians are trying to help too. But yeah, that's in some of the books too, that can, it seems so easy just to take cattle, 100, 200 head across a river, but no, they have their own minds too.
I'm on the fair board over here and I'm over like Frontier Village and we done a deal on Ben Snipes in the old schoolhouse there this year, and the museum helped me out. We got pictures and a blackboard, and I got some brochures I brought over here too if somebody's interested in taking them home.
Okay, did you guys hear that? He's on the fair board, and they're doing a big thing on Ben Snipes.
Yeah.
And you actually have a pamphlet too?
I left them here, I don't know whether.
Okay, I did.
They're on the
They're
table.
out there.
They're on the table.
Yeah. Okay, anybody else have anything to offer? This is how we learn about all these characters that came through here. This Ellensburg is a lot of characters.